Hello! So today, I'm doing a little bit of filming for tomorrow. Because tomorrow, me and the ducking historians are gonna be on a little visit. Don't worry, we're going somewhere nice. I don't have to get away with it that easily. Yeah! We're going to go see the Staffordshire Network for Mental Health at an event they're going to be doing at Whittington Barracks, the Regimental Museum thereof. Their military mindset event to support veterans and family members. I mean, I'm obviously not a military member, but my relatives have been. And you know, it's important I'm going more as a press event, but they said I could come, and that's really, really nice of them. So, hope you all have fun, and see you there! Oh, and I'll probably be wearing a different shirt. Before we did the interview, we went round the Staffordshire Regimental Museum's trench walk. Hello. So, for the viewers at home, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yep, so I'm Gemma Giles. I'm the Executive Operations Manager for Staffordshire Network for Mental Health.
Thank you. So, okay. So, if you don't mind me asking, what kind of personal qualities do you feel are needed to work in mental health?
I think it's really important to be passionate and understanding and have empathy. We can train people on paperwork, and we can train people on diagnosis and things like that, but you can't train empathy or passion, and those are really, really important, especially when you're around people that are unwell.
So, are there any things, like, say, if someone's had a mental health problem in the past, are there any issues with them coming and working for you?
No. Over the years, we're 23 years old, and a lot of percentage of our staff that have come through the doors have lived experience. It's really, really important. I find the best way to get the best out of our teams are usually because of their empathy, and they have that from lived experience.
So, one thing I was thinking was that mental health, there's probably not a delicate way of putting this, but there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and like, can you elaborate on how you might address some of these stigmas?
It is a really hard one, but the media do not help, and it's the wording and things like that can really throw people, or we personally like to do within the charity. We have a project called Emotional Wellbeing, which is our toolbox, and that's about getting people to understand there's mental ill health and then there's emotional health, and there's a massive difference. You can go through infidelity and breakup, and it can really impact your emotional health. It doesn't mean it's going to turn into a mental health illness, and it's about education really more than anything, because there's so much fake information out there. It's about finding the right sources to look for this information and having the right education.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I mean, I know in some ways perhaps Staffordshire's not the most diverse county, but there is diversity within Staffordshire, and different ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and so on. And are there any kinds of people that you feel perhaps there should be more of taking part, either as recipients of mental health care or as mental health workers that you'd like to increase in the numbers? And if you don't feel comfortable answering because I might sound a little political, feel free to let me know.
I think emotional health and mental health does not discriminate. Mental health, especially mental ill health, will go after anyone. You can be a millionaire, you can be homeless on the street, you can be in the military, or you can just be someone working in an office. It will not care who you are. It all comes down to our own individual uniqueness around us. So if you are suffering with mental illness, or you are suffering with emotional health, then please seek help. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't think twice for our physical health. We need to have that mentality when it comes to our mental health.
Thanks. I hope you don't mind me asking, what kind of jobs are needed to make Staffordshire Network for Mental Health operate?
So we've got quite an array of people. There's me, there's our fundraiser, we've got our toolbox workers that do the one-to-one emotional health, we've got our engagement officer that deals with our military, we've got our reach out facilitators that run our workshops out in the community, we have admin, we have our brilliant trustees that support us. It's a really nice team at the moment. We've just brought in a new person for our volunteers to make sure that they get that really good development and training and all that good stuff that they can get out of a community charity.
If you don't mind me asking, do you need to be a graduate to work for Staffordshire Network for Mental Health?
No. Like I say, it's all about transferable skills, and it's all about how you bring your passion to the role. I mean, there's a lot of different skill sets within our team, a hell of a lot, a very big array, from life experience to counselling degrees. It's just what you bring, and if you can bring that passion and empathy, I can teach you the rest.
Well, because this is the Staffordshire Network for Mental Health, is it like a county branch of a wider organisation, or is it sort of like more, in a way, if you don't mind me, if this might make, probably put it in another way. Yeah, is there like a top of, is Staffordshire the top of it, or is there like stuff further afield?
It is. We started 23 years ago as a project under an organisation that's still actually quite prominent within the area, and that was Sport Staffordshire. And after 3 years, the project turned into a charity, and that's where we were born. We were officially called Staffordshire Network for Mental Health, and then about 4 years ago, we removed the south and opened up so we could accommodate all the county, but our mental health in the workplace training and workshops, that goes all the way around the Midlands.
How do you feel that Staffordshire Network for Mental Health is connected and part of the Staffordshire community as a whole?
I hope that people know we're there and we've done a good enough job to show after 23 years. We do, we've got a lot of projects that people interact with within Staffordshire. We interact really nicely with other charities and organisations because it's third sector and everyone's supporting each other. It's a lovely sector to be in. And we like to be part of the NHS and interact with those guys, and 23 years down the line, I'd hope that a larger percentage would know who we are, but if they don't, we're really easy to find. We're very much out in the community, our leaflets and things are everywhere now, but yeah, I hope we're quite easy to find.
Yeah, I found you at church, and hopefully the video will help as well.
Yeah.
So I don't hope this doesn't seem like a too
personal or anything question, but what would you say would be the plans for the future of Staffordshire Network for Mental Health?
We're very much wanting to make sure that if someone comes to us with an emotional health need and we build their management plan, that we can help them fill the gaps to make sure they go back out into the community. It's the worst thing that can happen as a human being is to become isolated and alone, and we really don't want that if the barrier is there's a certain project that isn't in the community to support them. So we're always looking to see where the gaps are in the community and try and strengthen it, a lot like third sector organisations. And we just want to keep doing what we're doing. I think we're really good at it. My team are amazing, and I just find that supporting people with mental health and educating our community and getting Staffordshire to a point where people aren't asking why is it a stigmatised county around mental health. We want it where we're leading the country.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And they call Staffordshire the creative county, so I was just wondering, do you do stuff like creative projects, like, because some people talk about therapy through artwork or animal care or stuff like that. Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
I mean, I think creative is really important. One thing we try and push people to do is find a hobby and an interest. It's really, really good for it. It builds confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, self-value. It does so much for our own personal development. We try though there's so many amazing projects in the community that already do that. So we tend to link up with them and partnership with them so we can bring someone into that project. There's no point us taking that away from someone else when it's already there.
And I hope this doesn't sound too political, but some people take a view about mental health as sort of like about sorting yourself out and it can be sort of like undermining for people to just go out and seek mental health support, that they're becoming put through, just programmatized, and there's a bit of a sort of thing about you should pull your socks up and that sort of thing. What would you say to the people who say that people should just pull the socks up?
I've met quite a few people with that attitude, and it's really hard to change someone's mind, but I do anyway. I try. I always say, if you broke your leg, would someone be like, just go and walk it off? It's the last thing someone would come out with. Or if you just had a heart attack, they wouldn't be like, just get over it. Why are you lying in bed? Just move on. And when physical health, we are so caring as humans, yet we haven't quite got there with mental health and emotional health. And it's just about having a really healthy conversation with someone around it, if that's their view. Sometimes you can't change it, but trying to give them enough information for them to actually just think about it, I think can make an impact.
Because I remember sometimes psychiatry has a bit of a, let's just say, controversial history. I mean, there was a time when homosexuality was deemed a mental illness, which thankfully it no longer is. But one thing we're just wondering is, what would you say is, if anything, is the correct way to be mentally healthy?
So one of the things that we do as a charity is called the Toolbox, and that breaks down your emotional health, and we talk about, okay, how do you know when you're happy? I pay my bills on time, I go to work, or I go and volunteer, or I like to go out and see friends. I laugh more, smile more, and we start to break all of that down for someone. And then we bring in all that support and all of that really healthy stuff. And it's all around educating yourself. So I will sit and go, I'm having a bad day. This is not a bad day. This is what I like to call recharging my energy day. And it's really important for people to realise you are allowed to recharge your battery and just take that day, recharge and move on from it, and try and look at all the stuff that is around you, all your support networks, your hobbies, your interests, your job, all of that good stuff. Is that what keeps you well? Identify it, and that's really, really important. We don't identify it until we're in crisis.
So perhaps more of a person-centric form of mental health.
Yeah, always person-centred, always, because we're all very, very individual. What I like to keep well with will be different completely to you and to the next person, and it's very much about self-care and self-acknowledgement.
And I hope you don't mind if I quickly end off with a question about men.
Yeah.
But men are often told that, you know, it's unmanly, or it makes them less of a man to go seek help. Sometimes help, especially with mental health crises. Do you feel like, is there a message you'd like to give to men who are wanting to seek mental help but perhaps worried about how their social circle will react?
You can seek help without even telling your social circle. There are so many amazing charities and services out there that you can go to in confidence. You don't have to scream it from the rooftops if you're not comfortable. But the one thing that you really need to look at is it's all about you and what you need, and you're not taking anything away from anyone else. You're actually doing something really, really important for you. Our minds are like our bodies. We can only push them so far. And sometimes we just need that extra little bit of support. But the one thing I can say in third sector and NHS, especially third sector being in it so long, is no one ever will judge you for coming forward. I love having when the men come forward and talk to us. I just think it's brave, it's really healthy, and they're acknowledging how they feel, and that takes a lot.
Well, thank you very much, and hope you have a nice day.
Thank you.
And now we talk to the curator of the Regimental Museum, who helps make all this possible.
If you don't mind, would you mind introducing yourself to the viewers at home?
Hello, my name is Peter Collins and I'm the Museum Director at the Staffordshire Regimental Museum.
Oh, and it's good to visit you again.
Hello.
Hello. One thing we were wondering is, this is an event that's today that's about very much focused around military and mental health. What inspired the decision to host a mental health focused event today?
It's a very good question. The organiser, Carol Ann, actually got in touch with us through one of our trustees, who's very much involved in veteran affairs, and very much is what the museum is about, is representing the history and the feelings and the beliefs of the regiment that we've been involved with. And so for us it's almost a no-brainer to get involved with this sort of event. It seems a wonderful opportunity for us to be involved and hopefully help some people to achieve their life goals.
And a bit more generally about the museum, what kind of qualities do you feel are needed to work and be part of the Staffordshire Regimental Museum?
That's a very good question. So very much a pragmatism. You have to be a multitasker of various modes and things, but we as a team are very open, we're very flexible. We're obviously always very interested in military history and the endeavours of the Staffordshire Regiment. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be involved in that to be involved in the museum. Though we can be you can get involved in whatever way you like, from maintenance through to education, through to even doing filming of our events and things. Excuse me, man, I just got something on the desk.
Press pause.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaking of the whole museum, what jobs do you feel are needed to make sure the museum stays functioning?
That's a very good question here. A lot of perception, your museum's job in its existence is to look after, preserve and record the heritage of whatever organisation is involved with. But to make that happen, you need lots of different types of skills. You need curatorial skills, that's sort of knowing what items are, cataloguing, looking after those items in terms of conservation. But also you need to know how to get people to visit your museum and make your history engaging, because if you don't get people to visit, then really we've not done our other primary function, which is to tell people about history. We want to get people inspired about whatever whatever your museum represents, but making them interested and informed is what we're here to do.
And with regards to today's events, with regards to, say, with things like mental health and stuff, do you feel like, do you need experts in the events that you're hosting, and do you need to, and are there non-graduate opportunities at the museum more generally?
It's a very good question. In terms of an open environment, there is obviously, as you people would appreciate, there is some certain skills that you need within to make certain things happen within museums, but a lot of those skills can be learnt and can be gained through knowledge. So don't, if anybody is interested in careers in museums and for whatever backgrounds, they can become part of the museum world, learn, get inspired as they go along the way, change direction. In my time, as well as being at the moment, I get to run this fine institution. In the past, I've looked after collections, I've run exhibitions, I've had to pick up litter, I've given tours around National Trust houses, so you get involved in all manner of activities. That's what makes our sector fun. But you don't perceive, if you are not a history graduate or that you haven't done museum studies or that you can't get a career in museums. Museums need lots of the people to communicate their skills. That's no barrier.
So, because one thing we noticed was that when we're filming this is June 20th, which June being often associated with things like Pride Month and Afro-Caribbean Heritage Month, but we're thinking, because there's a lot of veterans charities out here, and people often think it's like November time where veterans charities come out, and so what was the inspiration for doing this sort of like in June rather than say around November?
It's a very good question. It's important to establish from a case of remembering veterans, remembering veteran services, that obviously that there is another 11 months in a year that veterans are still experiencing issues, trauma, celebrating and whatever. So it's very important that we make sure that we keep that in the mind as we go throughout the whole entire year. The reason why we sort of selected this particular date then was purely just operationally, because that worked best with the project team who were involved in setting the project up here and doing the event today, and the museum itself. So it wasn't particularly a chosen thing. We do like to recognise months, like obviously being Pride Month at the moment, and those as well, it's very important in our world. But being open and honest is really important, I think.
And sorry, I had following on a little bit on from this, because some people get the impression that like military history is a bit chauvinistic, macho. Oh, it's all sort of like boys playing dress up, and not. Some people even call it boys' history to refer to it being immature. Do you feel that perhaps this is an off perception?
Certainly, it's a perception that you can see within the past in the way, particularly military history, but some other aspects of history, industrial history as well, as the same in how it's portrayed. That it is a very male-dominated. It's not something, or sometimes we get, even in my present world, we have to do something for women, for instance, to get them engaged, or children to get them engaged. What we now within museums, it's a lot about making those stories that we have really engaging, looking beyond just purely the operational, which of course is really, really important, but looking at some of those personal stories about where people can engage and entertain. History, the military history is really, really serious, and there is lots of people who are engaged in it. Our job is to make it engaging to everybody, and I don't believe that we as a historiography area really should be focused purely on male, female, or whatever, we should be representative to all. It's really important.
Thank you, and thanks for nicely leading on into my question about historiography, because...
Always very excited for historiography questions.
Well, we're just wondering, the museum has a because all history has a sort of story element of like a narrative, what would you say is the historiographical approach that this museum takes?
So we often, what we try and do is report history as best we can in the best factual way that we can get it across. What we have to take account of is that many of our people who've written about the past obviously write about it in very certain ways. So we have to make sure that those ways that history they're writing is reflective and we understand the periods they're writing in, but of course where there is cases where people are using terminology out of date, their focus is incorrect or factual, simply assumption they are incorrect, that we make sure that those are held up and understood. But as historians, our job is to understand and interpret the past, and we can't load the past up with our own perceptions as now. That's always problematic to go down that route. It doesn't mean we shouldn't if there's things in the past that are problematic, that we shouldn't confront it and condone it, but we've got to make sure that that is understood and why it is that way.
Thank you. And a bit more specifically, because the regiment was founded in 1705 and
Correct.
The museum carries on the continuation of the regiment's story through being part of the Mercian Regiment.
Yes.
But I noticed going around the museum that World War One has a very strong focus. If you don't mind me asking, why World War One in particular?
So World War One's an interesting one. A lot of military museums focus on World War One and World War Two because of the they're on the curriculum, so there are probably series to cover within in that respect. We're also down to a factor of museums quite often take a long time to update. So when our last museum was updated was probably about 20 years ago, when the Second World War, First War was still quite fresh in the mind. So we looked to focus. The regiment did do some amazing things in the Second World War. For instance, one of our people, Lance Corporal Coltman, he was a highest ranking soldier of the First World War, so it's really important history to get, but we have to make sure we get a good balance of telling, as you rightly referred to, our history has been here for nearly 320 years, and we've got to make sure we reflect that entire history, and the Mercian Regiment now, which of course is producing history every single day.
Mm. And it's interesting you mention about Coleman, because one thing I remember being told by a guide while I was here was that he was in fact a pacifist.
Yes, he was a. So again, it's very important to understand the past. We're thinking about looking at individuals, but Lance Corporal Coltman was a strong Methodist. He was very strong in his a primitive Methodist actually. So he was very keen to serve his country and to fight. So I wouldn't perceive him as a pacifist, because that implied him, but he didn't want to, for his religious reasons, did not want to hold a gun and shoot at the enemy, as we refer to it. So he became a stretcher bearer in the war. But he was so different to how we might perceive a pacifist now, and somebody who was anti-war. Actually, Colton was not anti-war. He believed in the essence of the cause, but he wanted to serve his country in a different way, and he served as a stretcher bearer under enemy fire and doing many, many dangerous operations.
Mm. So, Lee, I mean, thank you for the correction, and sorry for the...
Oh, no, at all. No, it's a popular... It's also very important in how we understand the past, in that people sometimes get we perceive things that we'd understand now that maybe was different at that time. Also, of course, when I talk about Methodism, Methodism was not just Wesleyan Methodism, we were into primitive Methodism and various different other types. Very interesting figure, actually, Coltman.
Mm. Thanks, because, I mean, some people might think of a war museum or regimental museum as a sort of almost, I don't know if glorification of war is the right word, but Coltman's story being remembered here seems a bit of a contrast. Would you say it's a bit of a contrast to that sort of idea?
It certainly could perceive to be. A lot of military museums, they're changing now very much and have been doing over a number of years about not just reflecting the glories, as you rightly referred to it, but also everything else the regiment has been involved in. We have got many interesting stories to tell, and we often forget that an army's job, for instance, in our sense, being an army infantry museum, is to keep peace. It's not to wage war. It's politicians and things like that who, of course, instruct to go to war. So it's important that we get that perception across that many of the operations and they're normal people doing extraordinary things. And we're going to make sure we reflect that history and everything that gets involved in. So, for instance, we're dealing with mental health here today. For a lot of those people who in our various forces, they'll often be doing a long period of not on operations, and then suddenly they are switched on to be in operations, then switched off again. It's very difficult for mental health. Getting that story across to people is really important. It's a story about the people of Staffordshire.
Ah, nice. So, do you mind me quickly just jumping in before?
Not at all. No, you carry
before
on.
my colleague jumps in. But I was just wondering, because you mentioned schools earlier and the curriculums and everything, and war is often a very brutal affair, and
it is fortunate.
And there are certain aspects of war and soldiers' lives that may be a little bit hard. Not problematic in the political correctness sense, but problematic in the sense of conveying that for a younger audience. Mm-hmm. How do you feel the museum brings this authenticity to but in a way that a younger audience can be shown it?
That's a very good question. It's really important that we put the history in a way that people can understand and engage with. Often in the past, it can seem very divorced, particularly from my own children. What I was doing as an undergrad student may seem many years ago. So the First, Second World Wars, Napoleonic Wars, or whatever. They seem a long time ago. So you have to make it relevant to them. What's important is to get across the fact that people were still people, even though they had sometimes different things. They didn't have technologies that maybe we have now. They didn't have the conditions, the lives that we have now. But a lot of things are very similar. So it's getting across to those people that they were people. They can empathise, so understand where those people were coming from. And it's important for us to get that job across to them. With our school and education visits that we do here, for instance, learning visits, we do lots of cases of bringing that past to life from in a way that they can understand. Obviously, you can never bring the past to life fully. For instance, I'm sure you've been down our trench and seen it. It gives you a good idea of what trench life is like, but of course it can't be exactly the same as trench life. You're not being bombarded all the time. There's not rats getting about and mud everywhere and all those sorts of things, or caked in mud or whatever. But it helps to get people into that mode to make them engage and understand, so they want to learn more.
So, if you don't mind me asking, would it be okay if you elaborate a little on what you mean by the museum being a museum of the people of the story of the people of Staffordshire?
Yes, very much. It's more in the people. Our museum here represents the Staffordshire Regiment. That regiment recruited primarily from North and South Staffordshire, as it was in the past, and many of those people obviously got to go off and fight in our wars, in particular as we get to the First, Second World Wars, when the mobilisation was very strong. So often reflect those people and those histories are reflected in the museum. You can't divorce, unfortunately, what in any, particularly since the big wars like Napoleonics, the Imperial Wars we had in the late Victorian period, First, Second Wars, a lot of them had great impacts on life at home, sometimes causing, not in our country but in other countries, revolutions, for instance, or, and change in government and those things. So it's important that we make sure these are the histories of the people of Staffordshire. We don't cover mining, for instance, or whatever, which is one of the big stories in Staffordshire, for instance, or agricultural stories. But of course, those people came from those lives. They then brought all that knowledge, those skills, that ideas to their time when they became a soldier within our regiment.
And how would you like to say, bring the people of Staffordshire into the regiment's museum? As in, like, how do you feel you wish to be more involved with the current community of Staffordshire here in 2023?
That's a very good question. We've got to make sure we're relevant to those people, that we do feel that we reflect their history and their knowledge, their interests. We are Staffordshire Regimental Museum. We're part of the Mercy Regiment, so also we're reflecting the histories and the peoples of Worcestershire, Cheshire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, as well as our own in Staffordshire. So we're going to make sure we reflect their knowledge, their skills, and how they might access that history. It's really important for us to get that across to them.
And hope you don't mind a final little question.
No, not at all.
bit abstract maybe, but what do you feel a regional museum's place is in an increasingly globalised world?
That's a very good question. I think as we look, globalisation has been talked about for a long time. It's all, it's never stopped being global. It's just your perception of what's global, I suppose, over the course of the years and things. I think as regional museums, we've got a really strong place in helping people have a sense of place, having people an understanding of where they're from, whatever. It doesn't stop you from understanding new cultures, new identities, new understandings. But it's important to understand where you come from and what your values are and those things. So I think we have a really unique position in regional museums to do that and put certain things within and certain issues within a regional context. So it makes a massive global issue like global warming. How does that affect in a region? We're today we've had a period of about 3 or 4 weeks of really strong sun. Today we've got lots of rain and things like that. So it shows you that even just slight changes in climate can affect us even in a very small sense. And that's really important, I think, to get across that you can understand things on different levels. And we've got a really important responsibility to get people to understand. That's what we're here to do.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Nice to speak to you.
And I'd just like to thank everyone here at the Staffordshire Regiment Museum, and here, of course, all the voluntary groups and others even having our friends in the National Health, working with the National Health Service, Everyone Health from Staffordshire County Council came as well. And just feel like it was a good day to go. As we can see, with the Staffordshire Regiment Museum. And I'd just like to say to everyone, all those who help with mental health and our veterans and everything, it was lovely having you here.